Welcome to Encroachment Sports Talk. It is March now, which means March Madness, baby. So we're going to get into just, I guess we're a week and a day away from Selection Sunday. So we're going to get into some thoughts about the upcoming NCAA tournament. So what do you got, Chris?
Well, this is one of my favorite times of the year. I can tell you this is right up there. It's right up there with divisional football for me and other things. And in honor of basketball, I'm wearing my son's high school basketball jacket and his logo and stuff.
Nice.
So he played some basketball. Marco, you even saw him play one game, I think. But anyway, he loved basketball. Still watches a lot of basketball. I love college basketball. It's one of my favorite things. I love it because it is 100% effort and anything can happen on any given game, which is not always the case in professional sports.
It is. They play at such a frantic pace. My wife was watching. She's used to watching Celtic games with me, and she was watching a college basketball game last night. She's like, they're really playing fast, right? I'm like, that's what they do in college.
Well, to me, that's why I think it's so awesome. It's like almost a different gear. It's like they're not in fourth gear, they're in fifth gear. And
none of this ISO ball, right?
Yeah, exactly.
ISO ball.
Yeah, there's no ISO ball, and they play like 110%. Anyway, I've always been a big fan of college basketball. So this is the pinnacle of the college basketball season. I think it's going to be really interesting. Actually, over the next 2 weeks, we're going to get what I find to be very interesting, which is conference tournaments. Some of these smaller conferences, like I was going to name a couple, like you got the American, you've got the Colonial, the Big Sky, the MAC, the Patriot League, the Southern. I mean, all these little tiny leagues that will put in, their tournament champion. In most cases, that'll be their only entry into the tournament. Mm-hmm. And it's fun to kind of scout it at that level and it's a big deal for the students because a lot of these places don't have great football programs. Football, as you know, takes a lot of money and larger schools to get into. So basketball for a lot of these colleges is the only way they get exposure on kind of the sports scene.
Yeah, you know what's interesting is nobody ever talks about this, but basically every team in the nation's in the NCAA tournament. It's just double elimination for certain teams, right?
Yeah, that's a real good point. Yeah.
Like, there's 68 teams or whatever. Like we belonged in. It's like, well, you were in and you didn't win your conference tournament. So
that's right. And that's why I love it, because it's like a feeder system for the tournament itself, right? And so not only do you get that 3-4 weeks of the tournament, but then you get 2 weeks before to do some scouting and to look at some of these teams that don't get any real national exposure. So I'm excited about it. In general, I think you and I talked about this earlier, Mark. I'm really excited this year because I don't think there's any huge favorites. I mean, I think you can say there's some Alabamas, there's some Houstons, there's some Purdue's out there. And Kansas is the one big name that's out there. But there's no like Kentucky that's going to absolutely win it. There's no Duke that's absolutely going to win it. There's no North Carolina that is absolutely going to win it. So I'm fired up. I think this is going to be an awesome tournament.
I agree. What's best about the tournament, frankly, is just the format of it. Yep. You could have watched zero basketball in the season, and when it's single elimination, 64 team tournament, 68, whatever. It's just fun, and everybody's got their brackets and their pool, their pool. Everybody's in a pool, and it's just
great. There's so much going on, and just from the last couple of years, you remember things like Loyola out of Chicago making the deep run, and then you've got Florida Gulf Coast. I mean, some of these programs you've never heard of, and all of a sudden, David beats Goliath. But not only does David beat Goliath, but beats Goliath maybe three times in the bracket. So it's
funny. I have a huge theory. I'm not a hiring manager anymore, but I used to be. I'm switching over to the corporate world here. And when you see a resume come across your desk, or I guess it doesn't come across your desk anymore, it's on your screen. If that school has name recognition, whether it be for athletics or academics, it legitimizes the resume a little more. And sometimes these schools get name recognition from their college basketball program, right? Like if I saw Loyola Chicago, in the past, I would have dismissed it. Now it's like, oh, that's a good discussion point. I know that school, so.
Well, no, it's very true, because look at Gonzaga. I wouldn't have known that 20 years ago. I happened to go to, grad school in that conference, but I wouldn't have known Gonzaga from a hole in the wall. But that school is like, That's a big deal now. You get
It's
that,
really-
oh, that's a great basketball school, and it's actually not a bad academic school at all.
Well, you
So-
know, I might be, okay, so I'm gonna contradict what you just said, but I haven't done a ton of research. I use this website called niche.com, which is phenomenal for anybody who's got college, high school kids ready to do the college search. It'll tell you everything you want to know about every school. And I just looked at Gonzaga, I forget why, the other day. And if I saw a resume from Gonzaga, I'd say, oh, okay, Gonzaga. They have a C- in terms of their academics, which is about the lowest Niche gives out. So
Really? Wow.
yeah, but and again, that's the only thing I'm basing it on. I'm not to diss Gonzaga or whatever, but this one site rates them as a C-, which is the lowest I've ever seen. So that's exactly my point. It gives legitimacy to a school. So
That's surprising, because that wasn't always the case. 20, 30 years ago, it was, because that league itself is known for its kind of academic problems.
gotcha. Yeah, things changed through the years. I've known that.
And I think maybe a lot of people now go there for the basketball instead of the academics. So
Maybe.
it's a double-edged sword.
Trying to walk on, yeah.
Yeah.
So here's you spoke about the bubble. Here's some things. Year after year, the big conferences get overrated. Are you familiar with it's kind of a new term, I hadn't heard it before this year, but what a quad one game is?
Oh, I've heard the term. I don't know exactly what it means, but
So what that is they're trying to qualify the what's the word? Quantify the
level of competition.
the strength of each game. So if you play a really good team, but it's at home, that's different than playing them on the road. So it's like, is it a really tough game, a medium tough game, an easy game, or a really easy game? So quad one is home games against top 30 teams, neutral game against top 50, and away game against top 75.
Okay.
That gives you an idea, because I'm going to refer to that a little bit here. These are teams that are in Big Ten, the Big Ten. If you look at like ESPN's bracketology and who they predict like 9 or 10 teams. I think 10 teams.
10. The Big Ten, that's funny. The Big Ten, that would have been all the teams. Now
It's ridiculous. So look at some of the teams. Wisconsin, a 77 net rating, which is, the ranking of how strong they are. 16 and 13 and 8 and 11 in their conference. And 6 and 6. So this is the only thing that's somewhat respectable. 6 and 6 in quad one games. Okay. But that team does not belong on the bubble. They don't. Michigan, 54th in net rating. And keep in mind, remember, there's 68 teams get in, but I don't know how many at large, somewhere like 30. So it's like your top 38, you have to be as an at large to kind of get in. So Michigan, 54th in net rating, 17 and 13. 3 and 10 in conference, and 0 and 4. 3 and 10 in conference, and 0 and 4 against ranked teams, and they're on the bubble.
That's ridiculous. That's a good point, Mark.
Penn State, 56 net rating, 8 and 12, 4 and 6 against quad one games. Now let's go to the Big 12. Oklahoma State, 46, 16 and 14, 7 and 10 in conference, and 5 and 11 in quad one games. That's not bubble. And now here's another one. Pac-12, which is a supremely overrated conference. Arizona State, 63rd in net rating, 20 and 10, and 4 and 4. Let me give you an example. It compares to the team I root for, which has no business anymore saying they're anywhere near the bubble, because they were 14 and 0, and now they're 20 and 10. But Arizona State, 63 net rating, University of New Mexico, 51 net rating. This is current, up to date. Arizona State 20 and 10, New Mexico 20 and 10. Arizona State 4 and 4 against quad one, New Mexico 3 and 4, which includes 2 last second balls that dropped in, whereas Arizona State had a last second half court 3-pointer, So are you rewarding luck? But Arizona State squarely on the bubble, and New Mexico's not even mentioned. And I'm only saying that to say that Arizona State has no business on the bubble.
Well, and some of that is, again, name of the college. But what I'll tell you about this is, remember, there was an old rule of thumb, litmus test, that if you didn't have a winning conference record,
you're
not in. You mentioned Michigan 4 and 10. I don't know which one that was. 4 and 10 in the conference. I would purposely keep you out.
Oh yeah, and I don't think they'll get in, but just to be mentioned on the bubble is ridiculous. So I'm looking at something that ranks the conferences by their RPI ratings.
Right.
Number 1, Big 12. Number 2, SEC. No surprise. Number 3, Big 10. Number 4, Mountain West.
Yeah.
Fourth best RPI. So the teams that belong, here's 2 teams that are also mentioned on the bubble, but have no business because they should be shoo-ins. Boise State, 27th net rating, 23-7, and 3-3 in quad 1 games. And Nevada, 34th in net rating, 22-8, and 4-5. Those teams they deserve to be in there.
Yeah.
The one team that I don't get how the ratings broke down for Utah State. I've watched tons of Mountain West. I'm telling you, top to bottom, that's a tough conference. But Utah State is 21st in net rating somehow. They're 22-7, but they're 0-4 in quad 1 games, so they don't have an impressive victory. I don't know how they got to be 21. So they belong on the bubble. They definitely.
Mountain West is totally discounted this year, and I agree they're super tough this year. As you know, my son goes to University of Nevada, Reno, and that's a good team. I'm a big Lobo fan too. We both are. They have like 4 or 5 or 6 really solid teams in that conference.
Yeah, I would say 4, and it used to be 5 until New Mexico crapped the bed. But so just another couple thoughts. Like you mentioned this, I really like Kansas. They are 15-5 in quad 1 games. That's 20 of their 30 games have been against really tough competition. So this team is battle tested. So they're, no surprise. Kansas always makes a deep run, but they've got 2 first round prospects in Grady Dick and Jalen Wilson. And I like them and making a deep run. And I like Arizona too. Arizona is 25-5 record, 8-2 against quad 1 games, and 5-0 against ranked teams. So they're a little bit behind UCLA in the standings there, but I don't like UCLA, and I do like Arizona. What
do you think of of the Houston Cougars? And as my friend says, they're like junkyard dogs. They don't have any standout. I mean, they got a couple of guys that are pretty darn good, and I'm sure they'll end up in the NBA. But as a team, they go 110%. They press the hell out of you. They run up and down the court. I think they're a tough out. I mean, I don't know if you watched them at all this year, but they seem to be pretty impressive to me. I watched them at least a dozen times.
Just highlights. I think what they have going for them is that kind of frantic pace, which can get teams in trouble. But they're really untested. They played a really soft schedule, so it's just hard to gauge.
It is. Their conference is pretty weak. So
if I were a betting man, I would not take them into my Final Four, but because it's the kind of team that would be right for an upset because they're untested, and if somebody's they play a team who's experienced breaking the press and that kind of thing.
And more discipline, that kind of stuff. But the funny thing is, you say, if I'm a betting man, Mark, stop it. You're gonna fill out a bracket. You're a freaking betting man. What the hell? Just because you're not not because you're betting your mortgage on a freaking.
I live in the state of Hawaii. We cannot bet.
Oh, okay, that's right. You're not a betting man. I
am not a betting man. I fill out brackets for fun.
Okay. You play for lollipops. I got it.
So, real quick to kind of wrap up here, early exits, UCLA. They did beat Kentucky and Maryland early in the season, but Kentucky is very young and they're gelling more. They have a bunch of young freshmen, and so beating them early in the season is not as impressive. And they're 2-3 against ranked teams, so that's ripe for an upset there. And then there's a couple of teams like Tennessee and Baylor that are, I think, projected to be 3 seeds, and they're like Baylor is 11-8 in quad 1 games, which is a lot, but it's coin toss as to whether they'll win when they're playing a tough team. So
I hope we get to revisit this maybe our next session when we get the brackets announced and stuff, because I think that's when you really get to say, like in the old days, you'll see a Princeton setting up against somebody in Princeton, in the old days, and you'll remember those days. They are so disciplined with that backdoor cut and all that other stuff, and they could shoot the 3. If it was the right matchup, if they played a 3 seed or whatever, and they were undisciplined but very athletic, You could pick a Princeton, so it'll be
That would
interesting.
be New Mexico, Princeton beating New Mexico. The following year, this was under Steve Alford.
Yeah, I remember I remember it.
So be a little nervous as a Nevada fan once they get into the Big Dance. Steve Alford, you hope you don't play like an academic powerhouse like Stanford or Princeton. You'll be in trouble.
It's true. Well, good. I thought that was a fun segment. That was awesome.
Yeah. And March Madness couldn't get any
I
better.
can't wait for it, baby. Bring it on.
All right. Thank you.
Sounds good.